Okay, good morning. This is especially dedicated, of course, to my student, uh, Ma'am Marie. Ayan, so I'll not mention your full name for data privacy purposes. But since I'm teaching about HR, syempre there are other people who might be able to listen to this podcast of sort. So this is actually a customized HR course intended for a practitioner in HR. So first of all, I don't even know what I can still teach this person because she's already an accomplished HR manager uh, from an international scene at that. No, so ako naman, on my part, my name is Dr. George Atendo. And I've been around, so to speak. Uh, my expertise started from the banking industry during the 90s. And I first started to work. And then after which I got connected, with various consulting services, mainly from financial institutions. And then eventually, through my friendship HR, I got connected with schools or BPO or of time, then real estate construction, so halos lahat, no? Now, uh, industry. And then, of course, since I got connected with schools, I first taught in high school setup, if you would believe me. And then eventually became a principal, got connected in a higher education institution. When I was in the bank, I remember being able to handle everything because I was the supervisor. I don't want to call myself boss because I was only 26 day. I remember in the bank, but I was handling the whole of the housing department of my branch. I wasn't a CPA, but I was a branch accountant and became the head of the 10 branches within my mates. Because during that time, since we were handling clearing, this was the time na nagkaroon ng mga sectors si BPI. And then eventually I held that post before I started to, move in a different direction and eventually relinquish my banking career, so to speak. Actually, I still was connected to the banking sector for some time, but not in an operational capacity. So parang consultative na lang. So anyway, so welcome to our first session. So in this session, we will be talking about the strategic HR governance and quality assurance in HR. So ano ko din yan, some bagay na aking nahawakan for some time, which is the quality assurance. So first, let's talk about the uh, stuff that we will be that we will be handling, will be covering in HR. So first of all, in the first week, we will be handling or we'll be covering strategic HR governance and quality assurance, followed by Section 2, organizational development and change management. So OD and change management, very important in today's VUCA world, so to speak. So we'll talk about that more and more as we proceed. And then Session 3, we'll talk about talent acquisition and recruitment strategies, especially in the global landscape. And then Session 4, employee engagement and retention strategies. And then Session 5, learning and development, leadership. Oh, here, I know our participant, she's very knowledgeable here, So karamihan, nakita ko sa kanyang CV is about training, and learning and development. So yan, doon kami pareho yan, mapapir tayo dyan. And then Session 6 would be, I'd like to introduce, if you will know it yet, the IIP framework for HR excellence. This is the so-called investors in people. started in 1990s, 1992 for that matter. So we'll talk about that later on, as we proceed. So those are the six major, so weeks of uh, HR, topics that we will be talking about. I'll just check whether my recording is okay, and then uh, proceed to the first uh, session. Okay, so welcome to today's episode on strategic HR governance and quality assurance in HR. Okay, so this is Dr. George, and I'm excited to guide you through the key principles of HR governance and how quality assurance plays a crucial role in HR processes. So this session is designed to deepen our understanding of HR governance, compliance, and quality assurance in HR practices. Whether you're an HR professional or a business leader, these concepts will help ensure that your organization maintains compliance, efficiency, and strategic alignment. Ayan, yung tatlong yun. Compliance, siyempre may government regulatory tayo, even here in the Philippines or abroad, particularly in the GCC. And then efficiency, of course, we want to be always efficient and effective. And nowadays, this is what's the most important thing. We hire people, they are talented and all that, but we need strategic alignment. We need to align them to what we want to do, and we need to align our processes in order for our company to remain strategic. So we don't want to stay idle. We don't want to be staying in just one corner, and just waiting for our competitors to get ahead of us. We want to be always strategic. So pag sinabing strategic alignment, for example, in the frameworks for quality, particularly sa aking mga favorite excellence framework like the Baldrige, when we say strategic alignment, you connect your activities with your strategic advantage, hammering down on your strength, and then also solving your strategic challenges. So looking at your strength and weakness, hammering down on your strength so that you remain strong. Of course, that's your comparative advantage. And also solving your strategic challenges. So hindi naman yan habang buhay meron tayong ganung challenges, but we always adjust that, of course. But when you say you remain true to your strategic conditions, then that means everything that you do is in consonance or in coordination with that. Kasi parang there are many activities that sometimes that we do, that are not aligned anyway to what we should be doing. So this is where the tactician and the strategist leader will draw the line. So this separates the ladies from the girls or the boys from the gentlemen. To remain strategic is our, I think, the call for action for the day. So breaking it down into two major topics. Let's look at the two major topics here. First is the HR governance and compliance. As I said, that is something that's very important as well. We need to be compliant. We need to find our compliance to our regulatory conditions or regulations. And then quality assurance in HR practices. So in HR governance and compliance, this is where we will discuss the principles of HR governance in multinational organizations and how to align HR policies with labor laws, particularly in international setting. And then for number two, quality assurance in HR practices, this is where we focus on internal HR quality frameworks and competency-based assessments for workforce development. So let's go to HR governance and compliance. So let's begin by answering a fundamental question. What is HR governance? HR governance refers to the system of rules, policies, and processes that guide human resource management within an organization. So it ensures that HR practices align with legal requirements, business rules, and ethical standards. Think of HR governance as the rule book and strategic direction of the HR function. It is about ensuring fairness. Yan, ha? So lagi yung tanong sa atin, our HR is sometimes not fair. Diba? So kailangan we should remain to be fair, consistent. Sometimes we're fair, but we're not consistent. Or sometimes we're consistent, consistently unfair. Diba? But most of all, we need to demonstrate compliance, especially in regulatory frameworks, in all of our HR decisions. Now, in multinational organizations, HR governance become even more complex. Why? Because companies operate across multiple legal and cultural landscapes. So this is where I am very much believe, I salute you, Miss Marie, our student, preliminary student, because she's my student in HR. Because to be operating in an international setting, there's a lot of legal and cultural landscape that you must consider, diba? So those are the things. So what's considered acceptable in one country, of course, is considered to be sometimes not appropriate or even illegal, in another country. So that's problematic at times. So for example, let's take a global company like Unilever or IBM. They must ensure that their HR policies comply with diverse labor laws, such as, for example, in Europe, the General Data Protection Regulation or the GDPR. This protects employee data. In the US, there is such a thing as the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, and then workplace safety regulations in the UAE, for example. So this emphasizes employee well-being in high-risk industries. So to manage this complexity, multinational companies use HR governance frameworks which focus on, number one, corporate HR strategy, ensuring policies are consistent across all locations while respecting labor laws. Number two, compliance monitoring, conducting regular HR audits to detect policy violations before they escalate. And then number three, risk management in HR, preventing legal issues by proactively identifying risks like discrimination, wage disputes, or compliance failures. So how do we ensure that HR policies remain aligned with legal compliance and ethical standards? So we have here the best practices in HR governance. Of course, the most HR practitioners in companies, they do, number one, regular audits, regular HR audits. The organization should conduct compliance reviews, sometimes annually, sometimes biannually, to ensure labor laws. Number two is clear policy standardization. A strong HR manual, of course, with transparent policies for hiring, workplace behavior, and performance management should be in place. And it should be standardized. Number three, diversity and inclusion policies, very much important now, no? Ensuring fairness in recruitment and promotion processes. Number four, we have protection for whistleblowers, implementing confidential reporting systems for employees to report HR violations without fear of retaliation. So let's take an example. So let's imagine there's a company and it's facing a wrongful termination lawsuit because an employee was fired without due process. Man, very important to, no? Procedural due process and also substantive due process. So if HR governance was strong, meaning there were clear policies, proper documentation, legal compliance, the company could defend its decision easily, real time, anytime, right? Anybody would come into our office, inspect anything. We have everything in place. There is no need to shut down the company or let them stay in one corner first, and while we prepare the documents. No, we are always clear in our policies. We document properly and we are compliant legally. So the company in that respect could defend its decision easily. However, when you have a weak governance, it can lead to costly legal disputes and reputational damage. That is why HR governance is not just about compliance. It is about ensuring that the organization function efficiently, ethically, and legally. Okay, let's pause for a while to think about the things that we discussed here. So best practices in HR governance, uh, what it is, the compliance. Do you have any memories or examples of what happened in your own company or your past companies, maybe past experiences, wherein you either implemented this or made a boo-boo? What I mean? So made a mistake, especially when you were still young, committing some mistakes in HR governance and what happened. What did you do in order to solve the crisis? Because in HR, you always have to be always in your tip-top condition and always in your proper attention. No? It's like playing chess, If your mind drifts for a while, you commit a mistake. Either that mistake is a small inaccuracy, but it can be a big blunder. And sometimes, as an HR practitioner, if you're the head of the helm, if you're at the top of the helm, handling the HR department, so it can be devastating for the company. That's why we really have to not only train ourselves as HR head, but also our people. So I remember doing the same when I was in my former company. So every time we have lunch with my people, and most of them are ladies, I always meet with them. No, I think only two people. We were just three male. The one handling, I think, training is a male person, and then the one handling payroll. But most of them, all of them are female. So we have employee relations, comp and ben, government, and all that. No? So we always talk about our work. Of course, while we're eating, talk about our own concerns, family life, etc. No, if they will share, but it will always go to some mentoring sessions with them. But I don't want to pursue myself, and force myself, because that is a holy hour, so to speak, so because that's their lunchtime. But it always ends up like that because, first of all, there's a certain degree of I think, respect, no? Because I'm much older than them, no? So parang ano pang edad ko nung time, mga 40s na ako nun. And sila more or less mga 20, 25. So most of them are just starting out and they look up to you as they know that I was a teacher, and I think two of them were under me when I was in the head of planning and quality assurance. Kasi kami nag-handle ng ISO before, documentation, DMS, and then also when we applied for IIP, Investors and People, and PQA. So two of my former interns came from another school, interned with me, and they ended up, of course, kasi psychology major sila, they ended up applying in HR. So they kind of always look at me as if I am their teacher. That's why every time you speak, they would listen as if, they would listen to a lecture. And that is maybe the reason why there's a certain sense of respect and all that, no? And siguro in an industry such as ours, especially in a culture like the Philippine culture we're very much like as we talk about in Hofstede, or maybe what we will be talking about in Hofstede, the kind of culture that we have in the Philippines is, iba yung power index, mataas yung regard with those in positions and those that are older than you. Tapos we have a close family ties, right? And then there's high respect for authority. I think if you are a legitimate leader, I'm not saying I am, I try to be. And if you're like that and you don't really need to exert not a lot of high voice and loud voice in order to make yourself be heard, if you're being followed as a mentor by your people, then I think it will be easier that way. So meron ka din certain point of empowering them, engaging them, and then a certain level of trust, Kasi if you, una-una, you're not always going to be the person talking for the company. It's sometimes the recruitment person, it's sometimes the training person, sometimes the comp and ben person talking in place of you, right? So if she made a mistake, then it's you making a mistake, right? So you are being represented by your people. So yeah, that's the reason why we need to train our people. We need to not be afraid about, baka mamaya magkamali sila. Because if you start with that kind of an attitude, then the more they're afraid. When they're afraid, the more they cannot talk. If you're not confident, di ba, alam naman natin yan sa motivation theory, first of all, expectancy is, first of all, a question is, can I do this? Can I do this job? Pag ang sagot mo dyan ay no, immediately you're not going to be motivated. And if you're not going to be motivated, the more prone you are of committing a mistake. So there is a certain tendency of trust. Yun yung number one doon. Yes, you're allowed to make mistakes, but always recognize, that I'm here. Whenever we make a mistake, bawa, nagkakamali naman, puro tao naman tayo, no? We make mistakes. What we don't make mistake because we are judgmental. We will not commit a mistake because of our attitude towards other people. We may commit a mistake when it comes to, for example, not reading the whole policy. Tas meron pala tayo, nagkamali tayo, understanding sa isang certain point there, no? Pero if we remain open and the people looks up to us with that kind of respect, and alam nila na, okay, so itong taon to, he will not outright, be negative to us and, and oppress us in any way, then they might forgive. And most of the times they do. So always start, I think, with a culture of trust, a positive attitude, and always make them feel that what we're doing is actually for the good of the company. We don't want to oppress anybody here. If we do make a mistake, it's usually yung mga tipong, okay, sorry, sir, kailangan pala magpasa ka muna nito before we can, adjust your salary. Okay, nagkamali talaga, no? Sabihin, sorry, ganito, ganyan. And I think they appreciate that when you, lalo na sa Filipino culture. I don't know with other countries, and that's why I ask you, is there a difference? What about your experience? Is it okay to commit mistakes, in your line of, if you, in your experience, or like in the bank, in all my years in the bank, I think bihirang-bihira yung mistake. Yung mga mistake ko, yung mga run-up mistakes lang, which you can easily correct at the end of the day or sometimes even before the end of the day. But yung mistake talaga ng nagkaroon ka ng misposting or whatever na ang tagal bago mo na i-correct. Awa ng Diyos, wala naman nangyari sa akin ganun sa bangko. So siguro, syempre, pinagkakaanoan na rin tayo ni Lord na hindi tayo magkakamali na ganun masyado. You can always allow your people to commit mistakes, but not commit blunders that is hard to do, no? Hard to undo or to fix. Kasi when that happens, lahat tayo yun, the whole HR division will be problematic. Okay, so yeah, now let me know your experience in that regard before we proceed to the next part. Okay, for the next part, we go to part 2, which is quality assurance in HR practices. So we will shift our gears to discuss quality assurance or QA in HR. So what is quality assurance in HR? Think about it this way. Just as companies use quality control to ensure that their products meet high standards, HR departments must apply quality assurance frameworks to ensure that HR processes like hiring, training, performance management are effective and fair. So let's take a structured approach to HR quality assurance. As we know, there are three well-known models, of which I'm also a practitioner. So of course, medyo bias ako dito sa tatlong to dahil I'm a practitioner for all three. So first is the ISO 9001, no? So ISO 9001, ngayon, I think the latest is 2015. Wala pa yung 20... I know that they're about to release it, no? So alam na namin yung magiging more or less the keystrokes and what are the additions. But the last version was 2015. So this is a standard for quality management systems that can be applied to HR processes. So number 2 would be Six Sigma in HR. So a method that uses data-driven decision-making. So they make formula, no? Define, measure, analyze, improve control to improve HR efficiency. So particularly, this is seen in manufacturing companies and all that. But in starting, I think, 21st century, I'm seeing this more and more even in BPO companies and in some services, some companies that are in the services sector, yeah. And then number 3 would be the Baldrige Excellence Framework dito sa Philippines. Ang tawag dito is the PQA, no, the Philippine Quality Award. So Malcolm Baldrige started in 1987. Same with ISO, no? 1987 din yung first version niyan. This is the result of the quality movements in the 80s when it happened in the little backtrack, no, in the 1970s. Sabi nga nung napanood ko kahapon na parang the idea was that in the US, the window of 1948 to 1973 was like the best years of their companies and the industries and all that. So the biggest growth rate, etc., in that 25-year period, no, hanggang 1973. What happened in 1973? Kung hindi mo alam yung history, you will forget that in 1973, yan na yung halos the result of the Yom Kippur War, the Six-Day War sa Middle East, sa Israel, and then the start of the oil petroleum exporting country. So by 1973, they were, yes, ang daming investment in the US, but then starting in 1973, medyo nag-backfire lahat yun because of the start of the oil petroleum exporting country. So hindi na nakita yun, no? Na the Middle East countries, especially the oil petroleum exporting countries, started now to collude. The economics ang tawag yan, collusion, no? Nagkaroon ng collusion, and they now they now decide how much they will produce, at what price they will sell it. So medyo na-caught by surprise ang Western countries, and that was the start also of the market failures here and there. Hindi naman talaga failure yung market, no? Kasi iba ang technical term nun. But when the market dropped dramatically in the 70s hanggang late 80s, and then of course, the US lost Vietnam. Some might even argue that there's got to be a connection there. And ayan na, start na ng mga 80s, bagulong 80s and 90s. The Desert Storm and all that, War of the Willing. So papansinin mo, lahat talaga nagsimula ng 80s. And then in the 80s or 70s, and then in the 80s, they kind of saw that how come ang Japanese companies are still doing great, How come FedEx is falling, GM is falling, Ford is losing money and all that? How come when you look at the market, you see Japanese companies are still doing good, What's there? So they realized that according to the story, TQM, is one of the key points there. And they realize happily that si Deming Edwards, who's an American, who went there, was commissioned to go to Japan, is kind of instrumental also to that. No? Of course, the Japanese people are really disciplined people. No? So yung pagkaka-apply nyo ng mga principles of TQM, it's like they were at home with TQM because definitely this is what we're doing, right? So when they went to Japan, they sent people to Japan to analyze what are they doing here that we are not doing in the States. So they realized na, hey, they're just implementing what Deming Edwards taught them and implemented them according to their culture. Na yung culture kasi nila is more of, alam nyo naman, no, discipline and all that, right? And so, when they went back to the US, and some of them, of course, saw what was happening. So, meron tayo tinatawag na European response or the standardization response, which became ISO, ISO 9001, which started in 1987. And then almost at the same year, in fact, same year, 1987, lumabas din yung Baldrige Excellence Framework. So, and then 1987, 1992, lumabas naman yung Investors and People sa England, sa UK. And then at about that year, lumabas din yung tinatawag natin na Balanced Scorecard, the Strategy Focus Organization. So napapansin mo, because of what happened in the 70s and 80s, we had our quality response. And itong tatlong to, these are the most well-known or famous models in quality. And syempre, pag quality, lahat ng aspeto yan, particularly in HR. No? So let us apply these framework to real HR functions. So when you say, for example, recruitment and selection, how do we ensure hiring is fair and effective? By implementing structured competency assessments and unbiased selection processes, then we can align our recruitment and selection and even onboarding for that matter in order to make it structured, assess competencies properly, and then make our selection unbiased, okay? And of course, of high quality. What about training and development? How do we measure training effectiveness? We have evaluation models like the Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of training evaluation. I don't know what you're using. I'm sure there are a lot of other training evaluation model. We make use of the learning organization by Peter Singhi, right? The 5th discipline. There are so many models actually for training and development. What about performance management? Are appraisals fair and based on objective KPIs? QA frameworks ensure that employees are evaluated consistently and without bias. So ganun yung performance management. So when we talk about performance management, of course, in HR, this is very much aligned not only to the performance of the individual, but of the department and the division, and for the business the business balance scorecard, of the company, diba? So that's the only way I would say that performance would be evaluated consistently and without bias. Now, how do we measure HR quality? So we have a lot of tools as well. We can gather feedback from employees on HR policies and work condition using the employee satisfaction surveys. We can also look at retention and turnover rates and say, hey, how come we have high turnover? And then we can do some root cause analysis. So it could indicate, for example, an issue with HR quality if we have high turnover rates. Or sometimes it's not about the HR processes, but because of our benefits. So we can do a lot of quality assurance analysis there, maybe apply fishbone diagram, 5 whys, so many other things, that we can do in order to find out what is wrong with the processes and how come we're having a lot of turnover rates. Another thing is HR process efficiency matrix. We can measure time to hire, training effectiveness, compliance audit scores, and maybe you can still add a lot of things more here, because of your extensive experience with HR. Of course, one of the most effective HR quality assurance tools is what we call the competency-based assessment. I don't know if you're using it. If you're using, please make comments and all that so that we can do some sharing, in our class. So what is competency-based HR as HR management? So this approach ensures that employees are evaluated and trained based on their actual skills and abilities, rather than just qualifications or job titles. So here's how organizations can implement competency-based HR assessment. So number one would be job role analysis. So this is where you identify the skills required for each position. I'm sure you're doing that as well in your company. Assessment methods like using structured behavioral interviews, skills tests, case studies, and all that. And then number three, development planning, designing training programs based on competency gaps. So I did this with my former company, and I also did this with my two other companies, client companies, for my consultancy. So some companies are not very good at doing or design competency framework. No, it's difficult, especially if the HR person has not been there for a long time, or sometimes, yeah, that person has been there for a long time. However, there is not much connection between the HR and the functional teams. And you know how it is, di ba? Ang hirap gawin ito talaga na diretso, na masusi. Kasi you need the cooperation of department heads here. Hindi lang department heads, but talagang department heads who should know what's happening on the ground. Sometimes, kasi, of course, rightly or wrongly, there are department heads that are functional heads, yes. But they are just staying in the office. You know, sabi ko nga, nung nag-implement kami ng IIP, Investors in People, kailangan meron tayong open door policy. And they will always say, oh, Sir George, open door policy naman kami. They can always come inside and talk to us whenever they have a problem. Sabi ko, in Investors and People, when you say open door policy, it's not for the people to come in to discuss with you. It's for the leaders to come out. You have to go out. Sabi nga sa Japanese framework, when I worked with Toyota, sa Japanese framework, meron tayong tinatawag na Genshi Genbutsu. No? So you have to go out, go to the gemba, go to the workplace and see what's happening. Listen to the hum of the machine. Makinig ka dun sa tunog ng machine. And when you say machine, it's not just the equipment, it's not just the sound of the motor and all that, but also the rumblings of the people. Diba? The HR can do that effectively. Kaya nga, meron tayong tinatawag na framework na management by walking around, MBWA. So, doon mo makikita, it's very hard actually. It's quite hard to do this, no, yung competency assessment. Kasi tatanungin mo sila dyan, like for each work, ano yung nagda-job analysis ka, and then you look at the competency, ano yung key competencies, merong technical competencies, merong talagang core competencies na pang company nyo lang, no? So we call it sometimes management competencies or something like that. And then there is technical, specifically for the work. And then meron pa tayong tinatawag na institutional sometimes, no? Or sometimes leadership competencies. So doon mo makikita like how would you rate your people and how would you like them to be? So doon mo papapansin ano yung gap niyan, and then what can you do in order to design programs, for example, training programs, development programs, and then magagamit mo rin siya for, di ba, designing who's going to be the next gen leaders, sino ite-train ko next in line, right? So yan yung mga LDP or MDP programs natin, o MDP, di ba? Diyan natin makikita yan. So an HR department can create competency matrix. This we did a lot during those times, those years, no? Mapping the required skills versus the actual employee performance. Maganda pa niyan, merong feedback sessions ka, no? We call them just conversations. Kasi sa IIP, ang framework hindi dito yung yung talagang napaka-formal na okay, let's talk, this is where you are. Hindi ganun eh. It's more of conversation. Alam mo yung framework ng 1-minute manager, yung ganun lang. Yung tipong, kumusta ka na? Anong ginagawa mo ang project mo ngayon, etc. O anong may tutulong ko sa'yo, saan ka nagkagugulang, saan ka nagla-lack ng competency or whatever. Kasi minsan 'pag hindi siya marunong sa HR na terminology, when you say competency-based, parang sinasabi mo, "Bakit incompetent ba ako? Ba't ganito yung usapan natin?" 'Di ba? So, kailangan ipaliwanag mo pa 'yan 'no, and sometimes go down to the level of a non-HR person and then try to find out, "Oh, saan ako makakatulong sa'yo?" Instead na, "Saan ka nanghihina?" or whatever, 'di ba? So, even yung right bato, yung pagbabato ng tamang, the language is very important. And imagine you have to do this for everybody. Lalo na kung, if your leaders cannot do it, who will do it? Eh di ikaw. Yan ang mahirap eh. Kaya nga dapat talaga ako, I spent time really training my heads. Eh doon sa OG namin, operations group, I think there are about 25 people there, no? So, ay naku, ang tagal ko yan. Eh, siguro parang 2 buwan na OG yan ang pinag-uusapan. Ito yung gagawin po natin, ganito, ganyan. And hindi yan natatapos every week kasi every Thursday yung OG namin eh. Tapos magpupunta pa yan sa'yo after ng OG, "George, ano naman ako, paano gagawin ko dito, ganito, ganyan." And then Friday, ganun na naman. And then pag pinalo up na naman sila, "Dean, tapos ka na ba dito?" Ganyan. Naku, hindi pa. Ano ba gagawin talaga dyan? Tulungan mo nga ako. Tapos sometimes, "George, pwede ka bang sumama sa aming meeting ng faculty?" Yan, no? O kaya ng mga ng mga heads at saka nung kanyang mga department chairs or department yung mga employees, ganyan, yung mga staff. Eh di kakausapin mo lahat sila. Imagine, as HR, halos lahat ng meeting nila nandoon din ako. Kaso, yung hirap na yon one time lang. Pero pag nagawa mo na siya, di ba, lalo na kung supportive naman sila, yan, mga why people ang mga nasa schools, theory why people yan. Talaga, they really want to do it. However, yung minsan, talagang they lack the know-how, etc. So talaga namang tumutulong ka talaga sa kanila doon, no? So yun. When you look at yung gap, no, yung training investments mo would be targeted. Kumbaga yung training investments mo would be, ang tawag diyan ay rifle kaysa shotgun approach, parang rifle approach, no? Parang headshot ang dating, talagang saktong-sakto. Talagang culture fit at saka skills fit. So ensuring, no, pag pinag-focus ka sa competency-based HR organization or HR assessment, then you ensure that employees are hired and also trained based on skills and cultural fit. O meron mga may mga questionnaire dyan. Titignan natin yan sa susunod na mga sessions. And then we can develop targeted training programs for skill enhancement, particularly yung what is directly needed sa kanyang job as required by their heads or the department division heads, ganyan, no? And then finally, to improve HR efficiency by reducing errors and consistencies in hiring and promotions, no? Particularly yan yung even yung ating reduction of error, reducing errors, yan kung titinan mo parang Six Sigma to o kaya Lean, no? Creation of muda or removing muda in the organization or in the processes. However, you need to do this even in HR, no? So hindi lang siya sa manufacturing companies but also particularly in HR. Sabi nga sa IIP, I always believe in this. Good people make great companies. Kaya nga, if a great company will suddenly remember or not remember na nakabase siya talaga with hiring good people and keeping good people, then you have a lot of problems along the way, di ba? Ayan. So on closing thoughts, we covered two major topics today: HR governance and compliance, the importance of structuring HR policies to align with corporate strategy, labor laws, and ethical standards, and the number 2, quality assurance in HR practices, how organizations ensure that HR processes from recruitment to performance evaluation are efficient, fair, and competency-based. So when we integrate HR governance with quality assurance, organizations can create an HR system that is not just compliant, but also high-performing and strategically aligned. So final thought, no? HR is not just about policies and paperwork. It's about ensuring that people are managed ethically, fairly, and effectively. We have strong HR governance, and if that strong, it would lead to better employee engagement, stronger leadership, better training, learning and development, and then higher organizational success. So the next procession review in our next episode, we will explore organizational development, change management, how HR professionals can drive organizational change and structure OD interventions for long-term success. If you found today's session insightful, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. No, of course, particularly to my student, please share your thoughts in our classroom. And until next time, stay strategic, stay compliant, and stay committed to HR excellence. So this has been Dr. George Atento, and stay tuned for the next session. No, iniisip ko ano bang magandang podcast name ko. And since I always stay in my car, maybe I'll name it as. Anyway, stick around for my podcast name to be revealed next time. So thank you very much for listening. God bless everyone. Ciao.